Welcome back to the Law Factor Live. If you have a question about an emergency situation that you found yourself in and you doubted your actions or you'd like to share an experience with us, now is the time to call. As we're waiting, we're going to respond to a couple of your emails, but let me just say to you, all the people who are answering questions, there's just so many of you. We cannot respond and say, yes, you're right, no, you're not right. There's just too many of you and too few of us, even though there are quite a few of us in the studio. We welcome that you are participating, but please don't expect us to have a full conversation with you at the moment. However, if you have a question that you want to send, we're going to give you the priority, of course. The telephone lines are open now, and we have actually stopped taking your answers. Now, before the break, we were talking of different situations, and we were talking about CPR. Now, people have reservations about CPR, especially, in the days of HIV/AIDS and, all kinds of diseases that can be transmitted by saliva. Is there anything that we should be worried about?
As a first responder or someone responding to an emergency where you have a casualty, your first priority is yourself. So your safety is always paramount. So therefore, if you're responding to a situation where you have a casualty and you need to administer CPR, but your casualty is passing body fluids, so they're vomiting, there's blood coming from the mouth, yes, the CPR involves the 2 steps, chest compressions followed by the rescue breaths, then it's not advised that you do the rescue breaths because you're putting yourself at risk. However, it has not been noted that anyone has ever suffered from any situation because they administered CPR or rather the rescue breaths to a casualty and were able to contract something from the situation. In most situations, viruses begin to die once it has the body fluid has exited the body. Bacteria, however, take a longer process. And I think HIV is one of the case in points in that once a casualty may be HIV positive, but once the body fluid has left the body, the virus begins to die. That does not mean it's dead once it's executed the body, but the virus begins to die. So if you're unsure and you may not be comfortable as well, that you'd not want to do the rescue breaths, then you only do chest compressions and you do not do the rescue breaths.
Now, chest compressions, is it done the way we see in the movies?
No, because actually that's another thing that as first aiders, that's one of the things that they learn. You never ever try the things you see on TV and in the movies. They are not first aid procedures. We have a lot of medical series on TV, ER, Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, House, and so forth. You do not want to try any of those protocols. They are not first aid protocols. But they look
so real and they work.
And again, TV, it's all acting. Yeah. Now, in the TV aspect, you see some parts of those procedures, not the full procedure. So as a first aider, you're taught to never do the things that you see in the movies and on TV. There have been instances where persons have tried to and they were sued. So probably last year you heard of this guy who bore a hole in a casualty's neck area because the guy was not breathing, and he took his pen, emptied out the refill, and bore a hole in there to help the casualty to leave. The casualty survived, yes, thanks to the first aider, but guess what? The first aider was sued because he did not follow protocols. Simple as that. And it would have been things that you probably saw in the movies. Yep. So we know in the old Rambo films, we see gunshot wounds, you pour bourbon or alcohol and something in there. First aiders do not use those type of materials. For us in our local context as well, hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol, these are not first aid items. And in most of the instances, we use them for the wrong reasons. So we like to pour hydrogen peroxide on our wounds and like to see it bubble. Yep. If you read all the labels, it tells you these products are for external use only. When you pour those things into a wound, you're actually going against what your body is trying to do naturally for you.
Well, people think that's external because they're applying it on the outside. They're not thinking it's going in, I suppose.
Yep.
Okay, but what about things like iodine and red lavender? My grandmother used to use that a lot for me. No matter what I had my little... Yes. Did she do anything wrong?
In some instances, actually... for example, for a wound, anything that stings your wound is not good for your wound.
But
so, for example,
people say the opposite.
Yep, the famous friar's balsam, which we call baume de Jez. This is not a dressing. Some people put it on the wound, and then they apply a dressing and bandaging. Actually, friar's balsam will burn you even more. actually burn your skin, not just sting it, but burn you. Some of those ointments or rubs actually disinfectant. So you use it to clean a wound. However, you have other material like the monochrome, the purple one or the orange one. These would not sting you, and these are what you use as a dressing. But a first aider does not use those things. We add those things to our first aid kits. If you go out to the supermarket, to a chemist, for example, and you want to purchase a first aid kit, no time would you see hydrogen peroxide in there, rubbing alcohol, or any of those other ointments, because they are not first aid items. You'd get bandages, you'd get dressings, you'd get your scissors, you'd get maybe a burn gel and things of that sort, but not those other things that we tend to add to our first aid kits.
What about aspirin? We hear so much about aspirin, and a lot of people, they swear by it, and they'll say, oh, they don't feel very well. Do you actually hear people say to you, well, I gave them some aspirin because they felt that was what they should have done?
Very much so. And we hear a lot of that with regards to headaches. A headache is actually not an illness. A headache is the cause of something else. So in order to address your headache, you need to address what is causing your headache. Very simple things. And Dilly, I want to go back to your situation where we grew up with our grandparents. And I remember if you suffered a headache, they'd tie nutmeg to your head. But after they'd tied the nutmeg, they'd ask you to go and sleep or rest. All you needed to do was rest in order to address the headache, because you were tired, you were stressed out, or you needed to have drunk some water, or you needed to have drunk a cup of tea and things like that.
Let me ask you something. Did it used to work? You know, like when I remember my brother used to fall all the time, and my grandmother used to put a penny
on the bum. On the bum. Well, there is logic behind that, because actually what she was trying to do was to compress it. So she would bandage the penny on there. So there is some logic to it. So it would add pressure to it to help with swelling. So there is some logic to address swelling. You do compression, and compression means bandage in the area that is swelling. So there's some logic to it.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about the body, but of course we are in hurricane season, and I want to ensure that we have a little bit of time to talk about certain elements of it, because again, as you said earlier, Mr. Francis, that people, they wait until it happens, and then sometimes they don't even know what to do. But if we're looking at, say, an earthquake, it's rare, we're in hurricanes, we're in earthquakes. What's the difference between taking care of, say, a hurricane, or taking preventative measures for a hurricane and for an earthquake? People may say, well, they're two different things, but when we look at hurricanes, we're still looking at landslide of a sort. So how would you say people should prepare for, say, the hurricane versus preparing? Because hurricanes come at any time, really. What can we do to, say, prepare for either one of those?
Well, for hurricanes, we have prior warning, days in advance, so we have some time to prepare. Although we know we are in the hurricane season, so seasonal preparedness should be something of everyday life. But for earthquakes, they come without warning, but you can still prepare. Prepare where you're going to take shelter. Persons are tempted to run during the earthquakes, but this is not always the best thing to do. The professionals are saying you should stop, cover, and hold on to something. So stop wherever you are, cover your head, vital area to cover, to protect, and hold on to something, so you will not be thrown about the building. That's the best thing you should do during an earthquake. Okay,
what about your house, in terms of, can we prepare our house? It's not, because sometimes it's not just ourselves, but where we live. Is there anything that we can do to prepare our house?
Well, for hurricane, certainly your windows and your roof should be paid much attention to. Keeping water, ample amount of water and food supply is of vital importance, and recognize that your area may be a flood-prone area. So in the event that you're told that a hurricane is approaching, you need to know where your shelters are located, so you can be evacuated. You can evacuate even before you recognize that the place is flooding. Recognize or listen for the evacuation signals to get out of that area before the floodwaters come.
And of course, tend to your foundation. If you know you've got a problem there, whether it's your house or your wall, just make sure that you attend to that. This is the Dual Factor Live. As I said, we are going to be pulling out some names of the hat today or tonight, and also we are going to ensure that we tell you how or where to go if you're in doubt of any of the things that we spoke about tonight. So stay with us, we'll be right back.